Right, hello everybody, this is Antonio Wolf. We are continuing Franz Kafka's The Trial. We're in chapter 8, this is the second part. Probably will finish today. For those of you who, for whatever reason, may have begun here, something to entice you to go listen to the rest before you listen to this. Joseph K. is guilty. And Josh isn't here today, but he would say you're guilty too. Which you are. We all are. Anyways, here with me is my good friend Hyperion.
Hello.
And let's just get to it. It's pretty fresh from what we read last time anyways. So continuing from last time, we had Joseph K. talking with Block, the businessman or merchant, whichever translation you're using. And Block is telling him about his experience with the court and his experience with his trial, and K is enthralled by this, thinking that he's learning great things of importance, despite the fact that if you pay attention, none of it is important. Oh, and he's there to dismiss his lawyer. So, okay. So Lenny comes back. Well, look at you two. No, that's just... I don't know how they made these weird misspellings, but whoever copied this to PDF can't complain. It's free.
Wait, what? What's misspelled?
Look at you two sat huddled together. It's not misspelled. It's just like the wrong word. Sitting. It should be sitting.
What? Sat is proper.
What? Well, you look at you two sat huddled together.
Yeah,
That's proper.
Sat. Yeah. I mean, you can say sitting. That's the active. But they're sat down, huddled together. It's
literally never seen
a British
that.
Person who made this, because the British spellings. But yeah, that's proper. It's not common, I guess.
Not in American English, that's for sure. Okay, so, well, look at you two sat huddled together, called Lenny as she came back with a dish and stood in the doorway. They were indeed sat close together. If either of them turned his head even slightly, he would have knocked against the others. The businessman was not only very small, but also sat hunched down, so that Kay, who was also forced to bend down if he wanted low if he wanted to hear anything. Not quite yet, called out Kay, to turn Lenny away, his hand still resting on the businessman's hand, twitching with impatience. He wanted me to tell him about my trial, said the businessman to Lenny. Oh, carry on then, carry on, she said. She spoke to the businessman with affection, but at the same time with condescension. Kay did not like that. He had begun to learn that the man was of some value after all. He had experience, at least, and he was willing to share it. Lenny was probably wrong about him. He watched her in irritation as Lenny now took the candle from the businessman's hand, which he had been holding on to all this time, wiped his hand with her apron, and then knelt beside him to scratch off some wax that had dripped from the candle onto his trousers. You were about to tell me about the petty lawyers, said Kay, shoving Lenny's hand away with no further comment. What's wrong with you today? Asked Lenny, tapped him gently and carried on with what she had been doing. Yes, the petty lawyers, said the businessman, putting his hand to his brow as if thinking hard. Kay wanted to help him and said, You wanted immediate results and so went to the petty lawyers. Yes, that's right, said the businessman, but did not continue with what he'd been saying. Maybe he doesn't want to speak about it in front of Letty, thought Kay, suppressing his impatience to hear the rest straight away, and stopped trying to press him. Have you told him I'm here? He asked Lenny. Of course I have, she said. He's waiting for you. Leave Block alone now. You can talk to Block later. He'll still be here. Kay still hesitated. You'll still be here? He asked the businessman, wanting to hear the answer from him and not wanting Lenny to speak about the businessman as if he weren't there. He was full of secret resentment towards Lenny today, and once more it was only Lenny who answered. He often sleeps here. He sleeps here? asked Kay. He had thought the businessman would just wait there for him while he quickly settled his business with a lawyer. Then they would leave together to discuss everything thoroughly and undisturbed. Yes, said Lenny. Not everyone's like you, Joseph, allowed to see the lawyer any time you like. You don't even seem surprised that the lawyer, despite being ill, still receives you at 11 o'clock at night. You take it far too much for granted what your friends do for you. Well, your friends, or at least I do, we like to do things for you. I don't want or need any more things than that you're fond of me. Fond of you? Thought Kay, at first, and only then it occurred to him. Well, yes, I am fond of her. Nonetheless, what he said, forgetting all the rest, was, he receives me because I am his client. If I needed anyone's help, I'd have to beg and show gratitude whenever I do anything. He's really nasty today, isn't he? Lenny asked the businessman. Now it's me who's not here, thought Kay, and nearly lost his temper with the businessman when, with the same rudeness as Lenny, he said, the lawyer also has other reasons to receive him. His case is much more interesting than mine. Wait, who said this? I think Block said this. Let me just read that. And he lost his temper with the businessman when, with the same rudeness as Lenny, he said, the lawyer also has other reasons to receive him. His case is much more interesting than mine. And it's only in its early stages, too. It probably hasn't progressed very far, so the lawyer still likes to deal with him. That'll change later on. Yeah, said Lenny, looking at the businessman and laughing. He doesn't have talk, she said, turning to face Kay. You can't believe a word he says. He's as talkative as he is sweet. Maybe that's why the lawyer can't stand him. At least, he only sees him when he's in the right mood. I've already tried hard to change that, but it's impossible. Just think there are times when I tell him Block's here, and he doesn't receive him until 3 days later. And if Block isn't on the spot when he's called, then everything's lost and it all has to start all over again. That's why I let Block sleep here. It wouldn't be the first time. Dr. Holt has wanted to see him in the night. So now Block is ready for that. Sometimes when he knows Block is still here, he'll even change his mind about letting him in to see him. Kay looked questioningly at the businessman. The latter nodded, and although he had spoken quite openly with Kay earlier, seemed to be confused with shame, and as he said, yes, later on you become very dependent on your lawyer. He's only pretending to mind, said Lenny. He likes to sleep here, really. He's often said so. She went over to a little door and shut it open. Do you want to see his bedroom? She asked. Kay went over to the low, windowless room and looked in from the doorway. The room contained a narrow bed which filled it completely, so that to get into the bed you would need to climb over the bedpost. At the head of the bed there was a niche. In the wall, fastidiously tidy, stood a candle, a bottle of ink, and a pen with a bundle of papers which were probably to do with the trial. You sleep in the maid's room? Asked Kay as he went back to the businessman. Lenny's let me have it, answered the businessman. It has many advantages. He looked long at him. His first impression of the businessman had perhaps not been right. He had experience as his trial had already lasted a long time, but he had paid a heavy price for this experience. Kay was suddenly unable to bear the sight of the businessman any longer. Bring him to bed, then, he called out to Lenny, who seemed to understand him. For himself, he wanted to go to the lawyer, and by dismissing him, free himself from not only the lawyer, but also from Lenny and the businessman. But before he had reached the door, the businessman spoke to him gently. Excuse me, sir, he said, and Kay looked round crossly. You've forgotten your promise, said the businessman, stretching his hand out to Kay imploringly from where he sat. You were going to tell me a secret. That's true, said Kay, as he glanced at Lenny, who was watching him carefully to check on her. So listen, it's hardly a secret now anyway. I'm going to see the lawyer now to sack him. He's sacking him! yelled the businessman. He jumped from his chair and ran around the kitchen with his arms in the air. He kept on shouting, He's sacking his lawyer! Lenny tried to rush at Kay, but the businessman got in her way so that she shoved him away with her fists. Then, still with her hands balled into fists, she ran after Kay, who, however, had been given a long start. He was already inside the lawyer's room by the time Lenny caught up with him. He had almost closed the door behind himself, but Lenny held the door open with her foot, grabbed his arm, and tried to pull him back, but he put such pressure on her wrists that, with a sigh, she was forced to release him. She did not dare go into the room straight away, and Kay left the room with the key. "I've been waiting for you a very long time," said the lawyer from his bed. He had been reading something by the light of a candle, but now he laid it onto the bedside table and put his glasses on, looking at Kay sharply through them. Instead of apologizing, Kay said, "I'll be leaving again soon." As he had not apologized, the lawyer ignored what Kay said and replied, "I won't let you in this late again next time." "I find that quite acceptable," said Kay. The lawyer looked at him quizzically. "Sit down," he said. "As you wish," said Kay, drawing up a chair up to the bedside table and sitting down. "It seemed to me that you locked the door," said the lawyer. "Yes," said Kay. "It was because of Lenny." He had no intention of letting anyone off lightly, but the lawyer asked him, "Was she being importunate again?" "Importunate?" asked Kay. "Yes," said the lawyer, laughing as he did so, had a fit of coughing, and then, once it had passed, began to laugh again. "I'm sure you must have noticed how importunate she can be sometimes," he said, and patted Kay's hand, which Kay had rested on the bedside table, and which he now snatched back. "You don't attach much importance to it, then?" said the lawyer when Kay was silent. "So much the better. Otherwise I might have needed to apologize to you. It is a peculiarity of Lenny's. I've long since forgiven her for it, and I wouldn't be talking of it now if you hadn't locked the door just now. Anyway, perhaps I should at least explain this peculiarity of hers to you. But you seem rather disturbed, the way you're looking at me, and so that's why I'll do it. This peculiarity of hers consists in this. Lenny finds most of the accused attractive. She attaches herself to each of them, loves each of them, even seems to be loved by each of them. Then she sometimes entertains me by telling me about them when I allow her to. I am not so astonished by all this as you seem to be. If you look at them in the right way, the accused really can be attractive quite often. But that is a remarkable and to some extent scientific phenomenon. Being indicted does not cause any clear, precisely definable change in a person's appearance, of course. But it's not like with other legal matters. Most of them remain in their usual way of life, and if they have a good lawyer looking after them, the trial doesn't get in their way. But there are nonetheless those who have experience in these matters who can look at a crowd, however big, and tell you which among them is facing a charge. How can they do that, you will ask? My answer will not please you. It is simply that those who are facing a charge are the most attractive. It cannot be their guilt that makes them attractive, as not all of them are guilty. At least, that's what I, as a lawyer, have to say. And nor can it be the proper punishment that has made them attractive, as not all of them are punished. So it can only be that the proceedings leveled against them takes some kind of hold on them. Whatever the reason, some of these attractive people are indeed very attractive. But all of them are attractive, even Block, pitiful worm that he is. As the lawyer finished what he was saying, Kay was fully in control of himself. He had even nodded conspicuously at his last few words in order to confirm to himself the view he had already formed, that the lawyer was trying to confuse him, as he always did, by making general and irrelevant observations and thus distract him from the main question of what he was actually doing for Kay's trial. The lawyer must have noticed that Kay was offering him more resistance than before, as he became silent, giving Kay the chance to speak himself. And then, as Kay also remained silent, he asked, "Did you have a particular reason for coming to see me today?" "Yes," said Kay, putting his hand up to slightly shade his eyes from the light of the candle so that he could see the lawyers better. I wanted to tell you that I'm withdrawing my representation from you, with immediate effect. Do I understand you rightly? Asked the lawyer as he half raised himself in his bed and supported himself with one hand on the pillow. I think you do, said Kay, sitting stiffly upright as if waiting in ambush. Well, we can certainly discuss this plan of yours, said the lawyer after a pause. It is not a plan anymore, said Kay. That may be, said the lawyer, but we still mustn't rush anything. He used the word we as if he had no intention of letting Kay go free, and as if, even he could no longer represent him, he could still at least continue as his advisor. Nothing is being rushed, said Kay, standing slowly up and going behind his chair. Everything has been well thought out and probably even for too long. The decision is final. Then allow me to say a few words, said the lawyer, throwing the bed cover to one side and sitting on the edge of the bed. His naked, white-haired legs shivered in the cold. He asked Kay to pass him a blanket from the couch. Kay passed him the blanket and said, You are running the risk of catching a cold for no reason. The circumstances are important enough, said the lawyer as he wrapped the bed cover around the top half of his body and then the blanket around his legs. Your uncle is my friend, and in the course of time I've become fond of you as well. I admit that quite openly. There's nothing in that for me to be ashamed of. It was very unwelcome for Kay to hear the old man speak in this touching way, as it forced him to explain himself more fully, which he would rather have avoided, and he was aware that it also confused him, even though it could never make him reverse his decision. Thank you for feeling so friendly toward me, he said, and I also realize how deeply involved you've been in my case, as deeply as possible for yourself and to bring as much advantage as possible to me. Nonetheless, I have recently come to the conviction that it is not enough. I would naturally never attempt, considering that you are so much older and more experienced than I am, to convince you of my opinion. If I have ever unintentionally done so, then I beg your forgiveness. But as you have just said yourself, the circumstances are important enough, and it is my belief that my trial needs to be approached with much more vigor than has so far been the case. I see, said the lawyer. You've become impatient. I am not impatient, said Kay, with some irritation, and he stopped paying so much attention to his choice of words. When I first came here with my uncle, you probably noticed I wasn't greatly concerned about my case, and if I wasn't reminded of it by force, as it were, I would forget about it completely. But my uncle insisted I should allow you to represent me, and I did so as a favor to him. I could have expected the case to be less of a burden than it had been, as the point of taking on a lawyer is that he should take on some of its weight, but what actually happened was the opposite. Before, the trial was never such a worry for me as it has been since you've been representing me. When I was by myself, I never did anything about my case. I was hardly aware of it. But then, once there was someone representing me, everything was set for something to happen. I was always, without cease, waiting for you to do something, waiting more and more tense, but you did nothing. I did get some information about the court from you that I probably could not have got anywhere else. But that can't be enough when the trial, supposedly in secret, is getting closer and closer to me. Kay had pushed the chair away and stood erect, his hands in the pockets of his frock coat. After a certain point in the proceedings, said the lawyer quietly and calmly, nothing new of any importance ever happens. So many litigants at the same stage in their trials have stood before me just like you are now and spoken in the same way. Then these other litigants, said Kay, have all been right just as I am. That does not show that I'm not. I wasn't trying to show that you were mistaken, said the lawyer, but I wanted to add that I expected better judgment from you than from the others, especially as I've given you more insight into the workings of the court and my own activities than I normally do. And now I'm forced to accept that, despite everything, you have too little trust in me. You don't make it easy for me." How the lawyer was humiliating himself to Kay. He was showing no regard for the dignity of his position, which on this point must have been at its most sensitive. And why did he do that? He did seem to be very busy as a lawyer as well as rich man. Neither the loss of income nor the loss of a client could have been of much importance to him and themselves. He was moreover unwell and should have been thinking of passing work on to others. And despite all that, he held on tightly to Kay. Why? Was it something personal for his uncle's sake? Or did he really see Kay's case as one that was exceptional and hoped to be able to distinguish himself with it, either for Kay's sake, or, and this possibility could never be excluded, for his friends at the court? It was not possible to learn anything by looking at him, even though Kay was scrutinizing him quite brazenly. It could almost be supposed he was deliberately hiding his thoughts as he waited to see what effect his words would have. But he clearly deemed Kay's silence to be favorable to himself, for himself, and he continued. "You will have noticed the size of my office, but that I don't employ any staff to help me. That used to be quite different. There was a time when several young lawyers were working for me, but now I work alone. This is partly to do with changes in the way I do business, in that I concentrate nowadays more and more on matters such as your own case, and partly to do with the ever deeper understanding that I acquire from these legal matters. I found that I could never let anyone else deal with this sort of work unless I wanted to harm both the client and the job I had taken on. But the decision to do all the work myself had its obvious result. I was forced to turn almost everyone away who asked me to represent them, and could only accept those I was especially interested in. Well, there are enough creatures who leap at every crumb I throw down, and they're not so very far away. Most importantly, I became ill from overwork. But despite that, I don't regret my decision. Quite possibly I should have turned more cases away than I did, but it did turn out to be entirely necessary for me to devote myself fully to the cases I did take on, and the successful results showed that it was worth it. I once read a description of the difference between representing someone in ordinary legal matters and in legal matters of this sort, and the writer expressed it very well. This is what he said. Some lawyers lead their clients on a thread until judgment is passed, but there are others who immediately lift their clients onto their shoulders and carry them all the way to the judgment and beyond. That's just how it is. But it was quite true when I said I never regret all this work. But if, as in your case, they are so fully misunderstood, well, then I come very close to regretting it." All this talking did more to make Kay impatient than to persuade him. From the way the lawyer was speaking, Kay thought he could hear what he could expect if he gave in. The delays and excuses would begin again, reports of how the documents were progressing, how the mood of the court officials had improved, as well as all the enormous difficulties. In short, all that he had heard so many times before would be brought out again, even more fully. He would try to mislead Kay, with hopes that were never specified, and to make him suffer with threats that were never clear. He had to put a stop to that, so he said, "What would you undertake on my behalf if you continue to represent me?" The lawyer quietly accepted even this insulting question and answered, "I should continue with what I've already been doing for you." "That's just what I thought," said Kay. "And now you don't need to say another word." "I will make one more attempt," said the lawyer, as if whatever had been making Kay so annoyed was affecting him too. "You see, I have the impression that you have not only misjudged the legal assistance I have given you, but also that misjudgment has led you to behave in this way. You seem, although you are the accused, to have been treated too well, or, to put it in a better way, handled with neglect, with apparent neglect. Even that has its reason. It is often better to be in chains than to be free. But I would like to show you how other defendants are treated. Perhaps you will succeed in learning something from it. What I will do is I will call Block in, unlock the door, and sit down here beside the bedside table. Be glad to, said Kay, and did as the lawyer suggested. He was always ready to learn something new, but to make sure of himself for any event, he added, "But you do realize that you are no longer to be my lawyer, don't you?" "Yes," said the lawyer. "But you can still change your mind today, if you want to." He lay back down in the bed, pulled the quilt up to his chin, and turned to face the wall. Then he ran. So, up to now, I don't think there was much to say about anything up to now. It's kind of just a straightforward story elements happening. Probably the only interesting thing to comment on is that the lawyer has said that Kay has been treated too well, and that this has, when properly understood, has actually been that Kay has been handled with neglect, with apparent neglect. We already talked about this in prior stuff, where we mentioned the whole thing that people who don't face adversities don't understand how good they have it, and don't really understand the circumstances of reality. There's that proverb, somebody mentioned in YouTube comments, it's a Bible proverb, that the father that spares his son the stick, doesn't really love him. Which means if you don't discipline your kid, you don't really love them. Nobody likes to be disciplined, but it's a necessary part of you actually learning self-control and learning to appreciate things. So I don't think the lawyer is wrong on this, actually. Especially in Kay's case. It seems Kay indeed has not had much of a hard life, and that Kay has misunderstood the meaning of his own life because of it. Because he's not aware of how other people have taken the brunt of adversity for him. Just a reminder that Kay has, in prior chapters, is spoken about himself as if he's a self-made man, and he's the one who has picked himself up by his bootstraps, whereas there's been a lot of people who have been helping him, and who have just wanted to help him. It's no other reason, for the most part, throughout the story. Other than this, the religious clergy priest analogy continues. The priest never wants you to leave. They will try to give you any story and argument for why you leaving their church is a great mistake. It's not even about leaving religion. Just leaving a church, for example, bring the priest or the pastor, whatever you may call them, rabbi, and they'd be asking like, "You're making a mistake. You don't understand things. You need me. Trust me on this. You really need me. Nobody else can help you but me." So, continuing. Lenny appeared almost the moment he had done so. She looked hurriedly at Kay and the lawyer to try to find out what had happened. She seemed to be reassured by the sight of Kay sitting calmly at the lawyer's bed. She smiled and nodded to Kay. Kay looked blankly back at her. "Fetch Block," said the lawyer. But instead of going to fetch him, Lenny just went to the door and called, "Block! To the lawyer!" Then, probably because the lawyer had turned his face to the wall and was paying no attention, she slipped in behind Kay's chair. From then on, she bothered him by leaning forward over the back of the chair, or, albeit very tenderly and carefully, she would run her hands through his hair and over his cheeks. Kay eventually tried to stop her by taking hold of one hand, and after some resistance, Lenny let him keep hold of it. Block came as soon as he was called, but he remained standing in the doorway and seemed to be wondering whether he should enter or not. He raised his eyebrows and lowered his head as if listening to find out whether the order to attend the lawyer would be repeated. Kay could have encouraged him to enter, but he had decided to make a final break not only with the lawyer, but with everything in his home, so he kept himself motionless. Kenny was also silent. Lenny was also silent. Block noticed that at least no one was chasing him away, and on tiptoe he entered the room. His face was tense, his hands were clenched behind his back. He left the door open in case he needed to go back again. Kay did not even glance at him. He looked instead only at the thick quilt under which the lawyer could not be seen, as he had squeezed up very close to the wall. Then his voice was heard. "Block here?" he asked. Block had already crept some way into the room, but this question seemed to give him first a shove in the breast and then another in the back. He seemed about to fall, but remained standing, deeply bowed, and said, "At your service, sir." "What do you want?" asked the lawyer. "You've come at a bad time." "But wasn't I summoned?" asked Block, more to himself than to the lawyer. He held his hands in front of himself as protection, and would have been ready to run away at any moment. "You were summoned," said the lawyer, "but you still have come at a bad time." Then, after a pause, he added, "Do you always come at a bad time?" When the lawyer started speaking, Block had stopped looking at the bed, but stared rather into one of the corners, just listening, as if the light from the speaker were brighter than Block could bear to look at. But it was also difficult for him to listen, as the lawyer was speaking into the wall and speaking quickly and quietly. Just the way, okay, that's clearly symbolic now that I notice it. Earlier, Kay was also shielding his eye from the candle because he couldn't see the lawyer because of it, which is clearly not normal at all. Like, candles are not that bright. But it's definitely symbolic. I don't know quite what it symbolizes, though. I mean, usually this kind of one probably want to interpret this as like sort of a divine presence, but I don't think the lawyers are divine in this case. Although the lawyer seems to interpret himself.
Well, I mean, sorry, not lawyers, but analogizing them to priests. They try to be.
Yeah, they present themselves as divine, but I mean, like, just the fact that the candle is too bright and it's too bright for Kay, which is weird. So he has to look, or at least put a hand up to cover the candle directly, so he can see the lawyer's face.
Could be just light, shining on him is too bright for him because he's impure. Simple.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But then the lawyers, I don't know. That would imply the lawyers are somehow pure. It's not. Well, I mean, it may be because priests
can shine a light on things that are actually sinful or wrong.
No, yeah, like they can be honest.
Yeah.
And it seems at least that this lawyer, he really does care. Like, he's not. At least in this, it seems, in what he said about what he views his advocacy as. That the regular lawyer just leads you by a thread to the judgment, and he says, but he wants to be the kind of lawyer that picks up his defendant from the beginning, carries him all the way to the judgment and beyond. Mm-hmm. So he seems to be somebody who genuinely cares for his flock.
Right.
Which would make him a lot purer than Kay.
Which is why a lot of people do become clergymen. They're not all charlatans. They're not, or they don't all start that way necessarily either.
And
even if they do become charlatans.
And in this case, the charlatanry would be to no avail. I mean, Kay's already noticed the lawyer was rich already. He used to be a business lawyer.
Yeah.
So it's not money that he's after. And while it seems to me there is a power play in which the lawyer likes to take charge and to make his defendant eventually submit to him and have this dependence on him. To let him do everything while they just follow his every order. Which is to me an evil, but an evil that is probably born out of ignorance rather than malice most of the time. That they genuinely, I think it's they see themselves as the only ones who can deal directly with a matter, and they don't want to put their charges or the defendants that they're in charge of or with the stress directly, even though then they put it upon themselves to do some of the work to get them to move through the trial in some way, which I think is like part of the abuse we're seeing with Block, that it's a way for the lawyer to not only it's not just to assert dominance. It's a way to it's a way for him to not just to assert dominance. It's kind of like a psychological game, This used to be a psychological theory that was not completely debunked decades ago, in which a person was psychologically abused for the sake of tearing down their current ego so that then they can be reconstructed as a person by an organization or a therapist of some sort, and therefore be reconstituted the proper person that they ought to be. So this kind of abuse seems to me like it might be that kind of like outlook of therapy of some kind. Not a very good therapy, empirically speaking. We find that empirically just doesn't really work. So in relationship to them, the lawyer probably is definitely on a higher moral basis than they are. Though not by much. I mean, he just barely has a candle, and that's enough to impress or blind Kay and blind Block even more. So, right, but it was difficult for him to listen as the lawyer was speaking to the wall and speaking quickly and quietly. "Would you like me to go away again, sir?" asked Block. "We're here now. Stay," said the lawyer. It was as if the lawyer had not done as Block had wanted, but instead threatened him with a stick, as now Block really began to shake. "I went to see," said the lawyer, "the third judge yesterday, a friend of mine, and slowly brought the conversation round to the subject of you. Do you want to know what he said?" "Oh, yes, please," said Block. The lawyer did not answer immediately, so Block repeated his request and lowered his head as if about to kneel down, but then Kay spoke to him. "What do you think you're doing?" he shouted. Lenny had wanted to stop him from calling out, and so he took hold of her other hand. It was not love that made him squeeze it and hold on to it so tightly. She sighed frequently and tried to disengage her hands from him. But Block was punished for Kay's outburst, and the lawyer asked him, "Who is your lawyer?" "You are, sir," said Block. "And who besides me?" the lawyer asked. "No one besides you, sir," said Block. "And let there be no one besides me," said the lawyer. Block fully understood what that meant. He glowered at Kay, shaking his head violently. If these actions had been translated into words, they would have been coarse insults. Kay had been friendly and willing to discuss his own case with someone like this. By the way, no, he wasn't. Kay had no intention to tell him about his case. "I won't disturb you any more," said Kay, leaning back in his chair. "You can kneel down or creep on all fours, whatever you like. I wouldn't bother with you anymore. But Block still had some sense of pride, at least where Kay was concerned, and he went towards him, waving his fist, shouting as loudly as he dared while the lawyer was there. You shouldn't speak to me like that. That's not allowed. Why are you insulting me? Especially here in front of the lawyer, where both of us, you and me, were only tolerated because of his charity. You're not a better person than me. You've been accused of something too. You're facing a charge too. If, in spite of that, you're still a gentleman, then I'm just as much a gentleman as you are, if not even more so. And I want to be spoken to as a gentleman, especially by you. If you think being allowed to sit there and quietly listen while I creep on all fours, as you put it, makes you something better than me, then there's an old legal saying you ought to bear in mind. If you're under suspicion, it is better to be moving than still, as if you're still, you can be in the pan of the scales without knowing it, and be weighed along with your sins. Kay said nothing. He merely looked in amazement at this distracted being, his eyes completely still. He had gone through such changes in just the last few hours. Was it the trial that was throwing him from side to side in this way and stopped him showing who was friend and who was foe? Could he not see the lawyer was deliberately humiliating him and had no other purpose today than to show off his power to Kay and perhaps even thereby subjugate Kay? But if Block was incapable of seeing that, or if he so feared the lawyer that no such insight would even be of any use to him, how was it that he was either so sly or so bold as to lie to the lawyer and conceal from him the fact that he had other lawyers working on his behalf? And how did he dare to attack Kay, who could betray his secret any time he liked? But he dared even more than this. He went to the lawyer's bed and began there to make complaints about Kay. Dr. Hould, sir, he said, did you hear the way this man spoke to me? You can count the length of his trial in hours, and he wants to tell me what to do when I've been involved in a legal case for 5 years. He even insults me. He doesn't know anything, but he insults me. When I, as far as my weak ability allows, when I've made a close study of how to behave with the court, what we ought to do, and what the court practices are. Don't let anyone bother you, said the lawyer, and do what seems to you to be right. I will, said Block, as if speaking to himself to give himself courage. And with a quick glance to the side, he kneeled down close beside the bed. I'm kneeling now, Dr. Hould, sir, he said, but the lawyer remained silent. With one hand, Block carefully stroked the bed cover. In the silence while he did so, Lenny, as she freed herself from Kay's hand, said, You're hurting me. Let go of me. I'm going over to Block. She went over to him and sat on the edge of the bed. Block was very pleased at this, and with lively but silent gestures, he immediately urged her to intercede for him with the lawyer. It was clear that he desperately needed to be told something by the lawyer, although perhaps only so that he could make use of the information with his other lawyers. Lenny probably knew very well how the lawyer could be brought round, pointed to his hand and pursed her lip as if making a kiss. Block immediately performed the hand kiss, and, further urging from Lenny, repeated it twice more. But the lawyer continued to be silent. Then Lenny leant over the lawyer. As she stretched out, the attractive shape of her body could be seen, and bent over close to his face, she stroked his long white hair. That now forced him to give an answer. I'm rather wary of telling him, said the lawyer, and his head could be seen shaking slightly, perhaps so that he could feel the pressure of Lenny's hand better. Block listened closely with his head lowered, as if by listening he were breaking an order. What makes you so worry about it? Asked What makes you so worry about it? Asked Lenny. Kay had the feeling he was listening to a contrived dialogue that had been repeated many times, more, and that for Block alone it would never lose its freshness. What has his behavior been like today? Asked the lawyer instead of an answer. Before Lenny said anything, she looked down at Block and watched him a short while as he raised his hands towards her and rubbed them together imploringly. Finally, she gave a serious nod, turned back to the lawyer and said, He's been quite industrious. This was an elderly businessman, a man whose beard was long, and he was begging a young girl to speak on his behalf. Even if there was some plan behind what he did, there was nothing that could reinstate him in the eyes of his fellow man. Kay could not understand how the lawyer could have thought this performance would win him over. Even if he had done nothing earlier to make him want to leave, then this scene would have done so. It was almost humiliating, even for the onlooker. So these were the lawyer's methods, which Kay fortunately had not been exposed to for long, to let the client forget about the whole world and leave him with nothing but the hope of reaching the end of his trial by this deluded means. He was no longer a client, he was the lawyer's dog. If the lawyer had ordered him to crawl under the bed as if it were a kennel and to bark out from under it, he would have done so with enthusiasm. Kay listened to all of this, testing it and thinking it over as if he had been given the task of closely observing everything spoken here. Sorry, that's just weird. Kay listened to all of this, testing it and thinking it over as if he had been given the task of closely observing everything spoken here, informing a higher office about it, and to write a report. "And what has he been doing all day?" asked the lawyer. "I kept him locked in the maid's room all day," said Lenny, "so that he wouldn't stop me doing my work. That's where he usually stays. From time to time I looked in through the spy hole to see what he was doing, and each time he was kneeling on the bed and reading the papers you gave him, propped up on the windowsill. That made a good impression on me, as the window only opens onto an air shaft and gives hardly any light. It showed how obedient he is, that he was even reading in those conditions." "I'm pleased to hear it," said the lawyer. "But did he understand what he was reading?" While this conversation was going on, Block continually moved his lips and was clearly formulating the answers he hoped Lenny would give. "Well, I can't give you any certain answer to that, of course," said Lenny. "But I could see that he was reading thoroughly. He spent all day reading the same page, running his fingers along the lines. Whenever I looked on him, he sighed as if he was reading was a lot of work for him. I expect the papers you gave him were very hard to understand." "Yes," said the lawyer, "they certainly are. And I really don't think he understood anything of them. But they should at least give him some inkling of just how hard a struggle it is and how much work it is for me to defend him. And who am I doing all this for? I'm doing it. It's laughable even to say it. I'm doing it for Block. He ought to realize what that means too. Did he study without a pause?" "Almost without a pause," answered Lenny. "Just the once he asked me for a drink of water, so I gave him a glassful through the window. Then at 8 o'clock I let him out and gave him something to eat." Block glanced sideways at Kay, as if he were being praised and had to impress Kay as well. He now seemed more optimistic. He moved more freely and rocked back and forth on his knees. This made his astonishment all the more obvious when he heard the following words from the lawyer. "You speak well of him," said the lawyer, "but that's just what makes it difficult for me. You see, the judge did not speak well of him at all, neither about Block nor about his case." "Didn't speak well of him?" asked Lenny. "How is that possible?" Block looked at her with such tension he seemed to think that although the judge's words had been spoken so long before, she would be able to change them in his favor. "Not at all," said the lawyer. "In fact, he became quite cross when I started to talk about Block to him. 'Don't talk to me about Block,' he said. 'He is my client,' said I. 'You're letting him abuse you.' 'You're letting him abuse you,' he said. 'I don't think his case is lost yet,' said I. 'You're letting him abuse you,' he repeated. 'I don't think so,' said I. 'Block works hard in his case and always knows where it stands. He practically lives with me so that he always knows what's happening. You don't always find such enthusiasm as that. He's not very pleasant personally, I grant you. His manners are terrible and he's dirty. But as far as the trial is concerned, he's quite immaculate.' I said immaculate, but I was deliberately exaggerating. Then he said, 'Block is sly, that's all. He's accumulated plenty of experience and knows how to delay proceedings, but there's more that he doesn't know than he does.' What do you think he'd say if he learned his trial still hasn't begun? If you told him they haven't even rung the bell to announce the start of proceedings?" "All right, Block. All right," said the lawyer, as at these words Block had begun to raise himself on his trembling knees and clearly wanted to plead for some explanation. It was the first time the lawyer had spoken any clear words directly to Block. He looked down with his tired eyes, half blankly and half at Block, who slowly sank back down onto his knees under his gaze. "What the judge said has no meaning for you," said the lawyer.
Hello? You cut out?
All right, hello.
Hey, you're back.
How long ago did I cut out?
About 15 to 20 seconds.
All right, so where was I? Let's see. Did I already read then he said block is sly, that's all? Or before
Yeah.
that? Well, I'll reset there. Then he said, block is sly, that's all. He's accumulated plenty of experience and knows how to delay proceedings, but there's more that he doesn't know than he does. What do you think he'd say if he learned his trial still hadn't begun? If you told him they haven't even rung the bell to announce the start of the proceedings? All right, Block, all right, said the lawyer, as at these words Block had begun to raise himself on his trembling knees and clearly wanted to plead for some explanation. It was the first time the lawyer had spoken any clear words directly to Block. He looked down with his tired eyes, half blankly and half at Block, who slowly sank back down on his knees under his gaze. What the judge said has no meaning for you, said the lawyer. You needn't be frightened at every word. If you do it again, I won't tell you anything else at all. It's impossible to start a sentence without you looking at me as if you were receiving your final judgment. You should be ashamed of yourself here in front of my client. And you're destroying the trust he has for me. Just what is it you want? You're still alive. You're still under my protection. There's no point in worrying. Somewhere you've read that the final judgment can often come without warning from anyone at any time. And in the right circumstances, that's basically true. But it's also true that I dislike your anxiety and fear and see that you don't have the trust in me you should have. Now, what have I just said? I repeated something said by one of the judges. You know that there are so many various opinions about the procedure that they form into a great big pile, and nobody can make any sense of them. This judge, for instance, sees proceedings as starting at a different point from where I do. A difference of opinion, nothing more. At a certain stage in the proceedings, tradition has it that a sign is given by ringing a bell. This judge sees that as the point at which proceedings begin. I can't set out all the opinions opposed to that view here, and you wouldn't understand it anyway. Suffice it to say that there are many reasons to disagree with him. Embarrassed, Block ran his fingers through the pile of carpet. His anxiety about what the judge had said had let him forget his inferior status towards the lawyer for a while. He thought only about himself and turned the judge's words round to examine them from all sides. Block, said Lenny, as if representing him. Block, said Lenny, as if reprimanding him, and taking hold of the collar of his coat, pulled him up slightly higher. Leave the carpet alone and listen to what the lawyer is saying. This chapter was left unfinished. It could have gone on for longer, but frankly, I don't think there was much else that Kafka could have added thematically to what this chapter was about so far, as I could tell. Like beyond this, what more was there to understand about the relationship of Block to the lawyer, of the lawyer seeing himself as... I mean, the lawyer here clearly is vain. Like he aggrandizes himself above the process of the trial. He thinks he's got some kind of in, but he has no reason to think this. He has no reason to tell his clients that he could possibly have an in and that they should trust him about it. I mean, here, at least, after this chapter at least, Kay has made the right decision, in my view. Kay has seen through the bullshit that is the lawyers, just like he saw through the bullshit of Tittarelli and the false acquittals, the apparent acquittal and the deferment. He has seen, and the lawyer himself has already mentioned this explicitly, but not referring to deferment, but it is deferment. That what he and Block are engaged in is nothing but deferment. There is no acquittal that this lawyer could ever get him or anyone else. asks for the beginning, the ringing of the bell, the meaning of that. When does the trial start? Indeed, at least it's a matter of opinion. But it's a matter of opinion because they don't know. But it's not a matter of opinion of a fact. The trial does factually begin somewhere. I would say it's when you're fucking born. The trial begins when you're born and it ends when you die. And that's only one trial. It's not the only trial. It's part of a bigger trial. Block's being locked up in his room or reading a page over and over that he can't understand. This is precisely the kinds of people, and I have known some people like this in my life. After all, I have gone to church. The kind of people who obsessively read the Bible over and over and over, day after day, year after year, and no matter how many years go by, they learn nothing. I don't know. Do you know any people like that, Hyperion? Because I don't know that you've ever gone to church much, but I have known people at church.
People I didn't go to church? Yeah, I did.
No, I mean, do you know any people like that that obsessively read the Bible and clearly learn nothing from it?
Like they don't apply it properly to their life, or they don't understand it by reading it?
But yeah, they don't understand it in both. Like they read it obsessively.
I know a lot of people that read religious texts and don't really act properly, I guess. Or at least they don't seem to take it that seriously, actually. But they have this veneer of taking it seriously.
Well, I don't think it's not taking it seriously. I think Block does take it seriously. It's just he doesn't understand.
Yeah. No, not related to Block. I thought you were just asking in general.
No. I know a lot of people certainly might do that, but I've known people who take it very seriously. They just don't understand anything.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that take it seriously and don't understand, but they also don't seem, or they act like they take it seriously, but clearly they don't. I don't know. I think he does that. Block does. I don't think he's faking.
I mean, at least he wants to understand the nature of the trial. It's just like the people who just obsessively read the Bible and they want to understand the mysteries of God, but they don't know how to read. They don't know how to read it. They're too superficial about it. Block is a blockhead. He's superficial in a different way. He's actually more superficial than Kay, admittedly, because Kay has at least become aware that this is nothing but a veneer. That it can't possibly ultimately have anything to do that's positive towards this trial. It's all a mere appearance. The lawyer can't do anything for him, just as Tittarelli couldn't do anything for him. So,
yeah, Block is deluded, I think.
Yeah, so Kay has learned this much. I mean, Block is just engaging deferment of his trial. And Block is, because you can tell, Block is just worried about the judgment. He's not worried about the trial as such, he's just worried about the judgment.
Well, he doesn't understand the trial, so he can't worry about the trial.
Yeah, that's indeed true.
He thinks the judgment is the result of the trial. But the trial is the judgment. I mean, they're one and the same, basically.
Yeah. The trial is one giant series of judgments that culminate in the final absolute judgment, the actual judgment. Yeah,
there's no trial as they're not going to put you on trial and then judge you based on that. The trial is ongoing now.
Yeah, I mean, even the lawyer mentions that he's told, the lawyer knows and Block knows that the judgment could come from anyone at any time. And the lawyer says, yeah, that's true, but you're still here, you're still alive, what are you worrying about? So I mean, the way he's treating Block, does reveal a demonic side, and this is not demonic in the usual like, biblical sense. Demonic in an esoteric philosophical sense, meaning just an interesting tangent, by the way. For those of you who don't know, demon comes from daimon, which is also a derivative of devas, which is also where divine comes from, which has originally to do with higher spiritual beings, which are not necessarily good. So the difference between the divine and the demonic is quite literally a difference of outlook,
interpretation.
Yeah. So earlier the whole thing about the candle, it's blinding them. They could be interpreted as divine, validly, but the way that the lawyer is treating Block and the way he probably treats all his other clients shows to me a demonic side to this relationship. Somebody who genuinely wants to help you, even if they're mistaken. If they have any inkling of what it is to be a proper human being and what a proper human being should be, will not destroy somebody the way he's destroying Block. Will not dehumanize them and put them in this terrible condition of psychological dependence.
You're using demonic in the sense, to be clear, about a guardian angel's idea, familiar, in some circles. Familiar is a known term, or what someone calls their spirit animal or something. I don't know. But he wants to help Kay, like Socrates' demon. Socrates.
Yeah.
Like his demon, Socrates.
Yeah, so it's not entirely negative, but it is, at least in the modern day, we've started taking that to be negative.
Yeah.
And we have split that between
fundies who just. Well, okay, no, maybe not, but yeah, you're right. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just the word now emphasizes the negative, and I think this lawyer, at least with relationship to Block, goes into the demonic side more than divine.
Demons need to be properly understood, I think if you think through the concept, it's clear that they're not always what they're taken to be, but that's another tangent.
Yep. Although, again, another interpretation layer to this, not necessarily demonic thing, but taking on a lawyer, since everything is part of the trial, including taking on a lawyer. So,
yeah.
And Block is the one who decides that he needs lawyers. He's the one who gets the idea that he interprets all these things. So he goes ahead and does it. So it's as has been established since the very beginning, we bring on the trials upon ourselves. At least the important ones, by and large. And Block has brought himself to this state of kind of mania and manic anxiety.
Yeah.
All of his own account. The lawyer couldn't do anything to him if he was like Kay. Kay rightfully refuses to lower himself to this, but Block has accepted it. Another thing.
It's just
yeah, go ahead.
Another testament to him not allowing other. I mean, Kay obviously thinks he's better than literally everyone he's ever come across, since the beginning of the book. So it's just this proclivity toward being skeptical of everyone knowing any better than him.
Yeah, right. So it's not necessarily out of enlightenment
like
here.
Yeah, it's not because he's. I don't think I didn't read it as his, interpret it as his growing or anything at all.
No, it's not really that Kay has a higher understanding of like why you shouldn't take on a lawyer. He's just like, oh, this is pathetic. The thing about Lenny interceding with for Block with towards a lawyer, and it's kind of here is very clearly implied that part of her sway and power is this sexual attraction that she gets from people, or she gets people to have towards her. I mean, she crawled up on top of the lawyer, curved herself on top of him, and then the lawyer just kind of calmed down and softened up a little bit. She's whispered sweet nothings in his ear, and he was finally nice enough to tell Block something. But Kay notices that this kind of has a rehearsal aspect to it, that this has happened many times before. It's an endless runaround. It's a deferment, just like the deferment. It's exactly that. It's an endless runaround. Everyone's playing a role. Everybody's playing a game. Block knows how it goes. Lenny knows how it goes. The lawyer knows how it goes.
But the prior scene where she goes behind him and starts like tussling his hair or whatever, rubbing his cheeks, that's very odd as well. I mean, we've seen these sorts of things. And then
yeah, in a way, she
just, like tries to pull away, and he's like, give me your hand, I guess, and she eventually gives in. It's very odd.
And I think that points out more that she's typically before this, every time he went and he saw the lawyer, Kay would be paying more attention playing with her hands than paying attention to the lawyer. So she was a temptation, a distraction. At this standpoint, Kay has finally broken through this distraction for the wrong reasons, of course.
Yeah, I think so as well. What
else? I don't think there was much else to say besides these things. I think that was it. Can't remember anything else that was worth saying. I mean, as far as it goes, at the end of this chapter, Kay has finally made the decisive break. He has dumped the lawyer. He says he doesn't want anything to do with anyone else that lives with him. Not Lenny, not Block. We'll see if that is maintained. Oh, we're definitely stopping here because the next chapter is going to be a big one.
Very much, yeah. Very much so.
We're definitely going to be spending probably 2, maybe even 3 hours talking about it.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening, hopefully you enjoyed this. Not as dense as the other half of the chapter, but that's good. It's good to have reprieves of where you can just follow the story and not think about it deeply necessarily. But all right.
I agree with AW that there wasn't really much left with the lawyer scenes, the lawyer episode. I think he had time to write more if he really wanted to, but I know what he was planning, but it probably wasn't much else.
Yep. All right. For those of you listening, see you next time. Goodbye.